I've never played a lobby in a hotel before. I feel like a lounge act in Vegas. Thank you all for coming to the lobby of the Canads Inn here in the Polo Park. I've always wanted to say that. Literally, because it's a lobby, I feel a little silly, but we'll all feel silly together, because frankly, you guys look just as silly watching me in the lobby. So if you can stand it, I can stand it as well. There's also music or miscellaneous science fiction sounds emanating from over here. Am I right? What is that?
First contact.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, thank you very much for coming. I am the talented and beautiful Robert Picardo. Thank you. I always tell people to come see me live because you really can't appreciate my extraordinary physical beauty just from watching me on television. You must see me in the flesh. Here's my head. If the glare is bothering you, I'll put this back on. Anyway, I am in town here in Winnipeg shooting Beethoven's Christmas Adventure. It's a family movie. I play evil Mr. Smirch. Mr. Smirch is an unscrupulous toy dealer who is stealing toys from other stores and reselling them at a profit. So if you can't find the big toy of the Christmas season, it's because I've stolen it. And it's been a lot of fun working with the dog. The dog is number one on the call sheet. The dog gets whatever the dog wants. The dog gets special meals. And the dog has an endless parade of female dogs waiting outside his trailer. That's not true. Recently, I have guest starred on Stargate Universe, which will be airing in a couple of weeks. I reprise my character, Mr. Woolsey, or Dick Woolsey. Dick Woolsey is called Dick for a reason. He's kind of a dick. He started out as a very unpleasant character on SG-1, and then the producers decided they liked me, so they slowly rehabilitated me over the course of the last few years, and ultimately made me the commander of the Atlantis expedition. So those of you who saw season 5, wasn't that something? The producer called and said, "How would you like to lead the expedition?" I said, "Well, guys, you've introduced me as a jerk with no people skills who is a bit of a coward. How are you going to turn me into a leader?" He said, "Don't worry, that's our problem." And they did. They kind of made me into a reluctant leader, and it ended up being a lot of fun. And because Star Trek and Stargate have a certain overlap in the audiences, I think that the fan base was happy to see me on a regular basis. Thank you. And I think that they grew to accept me as a leader. Now, is my volume good? Can you all hear me? You can all hear me probably better than you want to. Good. But how about this? Do you miss the Doctor? Do you miss the character of the Doctor?
Yes.
I kind of miss the Doctor. You know, he was part of me for a long time. I don't really remember deciding how to play the Doctor. He sort of possessed me. He just sort of, he did things on his own. You know, the way he rolled his eyes and the ridiculous posture I had and all that. He just kind of came out of nowhere and took over when I was working on the show. And I think that's kind of cool. Those are the best kind of characters that sort of explain themselves to you, the actor. For those of you who don't know, when I first was asked to audition for the Doctor, I did not get the joke. The character was described as colorless, humorless, a computer program of a doctor, and I thought, gee, that sounds like a lot of fun for 7 years. So I turned my audition down, and instead I read for Neelix. And I read so successfully for Neelix that I tested for the role and came very close to getting it. It was between me and Ethan Phillips, who's an old friend of mine, but I did not know he was my competition. And the final actor was a British actor whose name, forgive me, I don't remember, but he was in Topsy-Turvy playing Sir Arthur Sullivan in that movie about Gilbert and Sullivan. Okay, I did not get the part of Neelix. And by not getting it, I saved myself 5,422 hours in the makeup chair. So am I depressed about not getting it? Not really. But the producers came back after my network test and asked me to audition for the Doctor again, which is very unusual. In television, once you have tested for a project, if you don't get it, you're like yesterday's news. You're you're an old, discarded paper towel, and they move forward and look for the next actor. So the fact that they came back to me and said, would you read for the part that we originally wanted to see you for? And at that point, I had really fallen in love with the caretaker script. And I think my wife had fallen in love with the idea of my having a steady job. So I read the lines to her, and my wife said, I think you're funny. So I guess she was right. I only had 9 lines, I think, to audition for the Doctor, and I knew they were looking for someone to make them laugh. So I did what you never do at an audition, and you never do it at a Star Trek audition. I ad-libbed. Big no-no. The casting director was exhausted. She had been trying to bring the cast together. They were having trouble finding a Captain Janeway, as you know. The casting director who's reading with me at the audition. Now bear in mind, I'm the only actor in Voyager who auditioned for the role he played one time. When you audition for a running role in a television series, you'll have as many as 4 or 5 auditions. If you're an unestablished actor, a younger actor, you'll audition first for the casting director, then for the casting director and the producers, then the casting director, the producers, and the studio executives, then the casting director, producers, studio executive, network executives. So you have a series of auditions where they keep adding more people in. I went, because I'd already auditioned and tested once for another part, I walked in the room, and there are all the Star Trek producers, Rick Berman, Michael Piller, Jerry Taylor, the heads of Paramount Television, the heads of the new United Paramount Network, room full of people. Michael Piller very kindly says, Bob, do you have any questions? Or I said, no, I'll just take a stab at it, and then if you want me to do something different, I'll do it. Okay, so now you remember on Voyager, there's in the pilot a tremendous, we've been pulled across the universe. A number of the ship's crew have been killed, including the regular Doctor. They activate the EMH. And it's the first time he's ever been activated. It's a brand new technology. And one of my first lines, I scan a wounded crewman, and I say, your injuries are not serious, you can return to your station. Well, I scanned the casting director, a woman named Nan Dutton, who was exhausted, as I said, and I said, your injuries are not serious, you can return to casting. And she laughed so hard she almost dropped her pages, because I had shocked her by saying something that I wasn't supposed to say. Then I said the last 2 lines. The final line in the script was, I believe someone has failed to terminate my program. And I took a long deadpan look at everyone in the room, and I said, I'm a doctor, not a nightlight. Got a big laugh, walked out, and they hired me immediately. So because of a cheap DeForest Kelley ripoff, I had 7 years of constant employment. Thank you, D. Kelly. When I met D. Kelly, I said, you know, my character pays homage to you all the time. He said, oh, you mean you steal from me? I said, yep, pretty much. And then, as I started to play the character, things occasionally would surprise me that no one had told me about before. As an example, there was an episode called Message in a Bottle that guest starred Andy Dick. Remember? I love the way he said, oh yeah. Andy Dick is an unusual name, by the way. When I met Andy Dick, he said to me, this is the first time I met him, he said, your name Picardo is so much like Picard. Do you get teased a lot for that? I said, wait a minute, your name is Andy Dick and you're going to make fun of mine? We ended up getting along very well. We had a lot of fun together. I was a little concerned that, you know, they might put a little blurb in TV Guide, the way they sometimes do when you have a well-known guest star, a little close-up box. And I was concerned what the caption might be. Picardo and Dick. Or Picardo, well, you know what, too many children here. I won't do any more Andy Dick jokes. In any case, in that episode, the Doctor is bragging the doctor's bragging to the EMH Mach 2 about how, because of his his portable emitter, he has full run of the ship and is not simply limited to sick bay's holographic environment. He brags that he's become a full-fledged member of the crew and that he's even had sexual relations. I read this line and I called the producers. I said, "Excuse me, when did he have sexual relations? How did I miss that?" I mean, because, you know, we saw him in the pilot in his first activation. We never saw him, except for one episode with Dinara Pell. We didn't really see him on a date or anything. So I said, well, why would he have, why would the doctor have one of those if he's designed for emergency medical purposes only? What kind of emergency medical procedures are we thinking about? So because I didn't get a real good answer for that, I decided to write the story myself of how the doctor happened to have his program upgraded. And I actually wrote a Star Trek book called The Hologram's Handbook. The Hologram's Handbook is sort of a satire of a self-help book. If you're an advanced artificial intelligence, this book tells you how to get along with stupid people, with your inferiors. And I have the audiobook version of it here, where I read the funniest parts of the books. And it's just for a quick plug. It also benefits the Pediatric AIDS Foundation. Part of the proceeds go to that from every disc sold. So I'm now going to read you a selection from the Hologram's Handbook. This was my imagining, since I wrote this, this is my imagining of how the doctor happened to get his anatomical upgrade. The chapter is called Anatomical Correctness, the Program Upgrade of Kings. To use my own experience as an example, I was supposed to petition my captain for this and any other new systems upgrade. The delicate nature of this particular request did not deter me. I proposed countless scenarios to her in which the benefit that I would derive from first-hand intimate experience would prove invaluable for my understanding and treatment of future patients, particularly their sexual disorders. Captain Janeway seemed quite convinced after scenario number 26 and felt that hearing the remaining 187 wasn't necessary for her to make a decision. Permission was granted, and Lieutenant Torres was assigned to implement the upgrade. I offered a few suggestions, and was a little miffed to find that B'Elanna, who had recently begun dating Tom Paris, had her own modest design parameters firmly in hand. Having prided myself in my unique individuality, I was understandably reluctant to be assigned my newest feature without regard for my opinion and taste. Nonetheless, I was relatively satisfied with the outcome, and the first dozen or so tests on the holodeck that afternoon proved successful. I might also add that the complete control over my program protocols, which Captain Janeway entrusted to me several years ago, extends quite logically to all of my appearance parameters, even those not normally in evidence. B'Elanna's lack of regard for my suggestions is now a distant memory, as I've suggested and approved several upgrades to myself in the interim. Thank you. That was 45 seconds of penis jokes told in a way that you couldn't offend a child, right? That was my goal. I will entertain your questions, if you'd like. If you feel free to ask a question. Oh, the young lady in the front row. I did offend you after all. Yes. What's your question? She doesn't have a question. No, but it's good that you thought you did, because that meant you were interested. The cute little girl in the front row thought she had a question. Does anybody know her question for her? No? Anybody? In the back, the gentleman with the scarf on. That's you. He forgot he had a scarf on. The question was about Gremlins 2 and my relationship with Joe Dante, a director who's been very kind to me over the years. I think I've worked with Joe about 10 or 12 times. Originally, Joe had seen me on Broadway in a play that I played Jack Lemmon's son in the late 70s, and subsequently he cast me as his werewolf in The Howling. Now, how he decided from seeing me play an uptight 21-year-old in a Broadway show and decided that was his werewolf, I don't know. But I did The Howling for him and about 5 or 6 other movies, including Inner Space, Gremlins 2, The Burbs, Looney Tunes, Back in Action, and Small Soldiers, and then several television projects. In Gremlins 2, I play the sort of the villain in it. He's sort of the henchman of the Donald Trump character, played by John Glover, and it's my job to basically exert control over all the many people that work in our giant downtown office building called Clamp Towers. And then, of course, a female gremlin falls in love with me and chases me throughout the rest of the movie. Tears my pant leg off. What I remember most about the movie is when the female gremlin jumped on me, I had to operate the puppet myself. And what they do is they create what's called a butt puppet. I'm sorry about the name, because the actor puts his arm up the butt of the puppet and operates the puppet. So here's what I did. This side of my body was normal. This side of my body had an artificial arm inside my suit jacket that was sewn. They sewed the artificial hand to the back of the puppet. My real arm kind of snaked through like this. Here's the artificial arm. My real arm snaked through my shirt, came out the front of my shirt. They put the gremlin puppet over my arm, and as I said, sewed the artificial hand to the back of the gremlin's head. It looked like I was trying to push her away. And then I would run down the hall doing this. And I literally made myself black and blue from hitting myself so hard with this gremlin trying to kiss me and all that in my face. It's a little silly, but that's what you do in a puppet movie. When you're standing still, then the puppet is actually operated by cables and by other people. But when I'm running down the hallway, I'm making the puppet move myself. And what do I remember from I remember 2 things from the job. First of all, once the female puppet had torn my pant leg off, I had to have lip marks up and down my leg where she had kissed me. And the prop department probably could have just made a stamp that was like a pair of female lips and stamped the lipstick on me. But instead, the second prop assistant was a very cute girl in her late 20s who had a really nice pair of lips, and it was her job to put lipstick on and kiss me all over my leg. Which I thought wasn't fair to her. She didn't seem to mind. She was okay. I said, "Are you okay with this?" She said, "Yeah." So that was one of the perks of the job for me. She later went on to be a very famous prop mistress and worked on a popular television show. And I ran into her years later. She was married and had 2 or 3 kids. And I said, "Did you ever tell your husband that one of your jobs was to kiss me all over the leg?" And she said, "No." Or if she had, she wouldn't own up to it. And then in the final scene in the movie, I get trapped in the men's room by the female gremlin. And I think that's one of the kinkiest scenes in the world. Because I kind of like go, well, what the heck? At least I'm getting interest from some female. So it's a crazy movie. I really like it. I think it's a lot of fun. I wish it had been more successful because, in my opinion, it's a better movie than the first Gremlins. But in any case, I also have a Gremlins 2 picture on my autograph table, which is when I'm holding I think it is the butt puppet scene. I think it's the scene where I'm operating the female. Any other questions? Yes, sir. With the haircut I admire. Yes, here.
Could you tell us a little bit about how it was on the set of Voyager and how it was acting with some of the other actors?
Sure. We had the question was, what was it like on the set of Voyager? I loved going to work. I had great relationships with all of the other actors. I mean, obviously, you're closer with some of your coworkers than others. But just to start off, all of the men from Voyager get together for dinner 2 or 3 times a year. We'll meet at a nice restaurant, and we all get together. Now, it's over 10 years since we finished. So we have we call it Boy Boys. We have Boy Boys Night Out. And the last one was about 6 weeks ago. Robert Beltran was doing a play reading, so he missed that one. Sometimes somebody misses, but the time before that we were all 6 together. So we all get along and really value the time we spend together. We tell a lot of nostalgic stories. I also had I think the Doctor had a great relationship with first of all, Kes, when she was on the show. Kes was the Doctor's first confidant. And then when 7 of 9 came aboard, and I spoke to the producers and said, now that Jennifer is leaving the show, that, you know, Kes was the Doctor's mentor as far as his growing humanity. And he was mentoring her, obviously, in medicine, but she was mentoring him equally in teaching him what it meant, really, to be a human. So I said, I'm worried about losing that confidant because I don't want to just go back to being a joke, a windbag kind of a joke, because I don't have that kind of intimacy with any of the other characters. And Brannon suggested that I think of a way to relate to our new character, 7 of 9, played by Jerry Ryan. Well, once I had seen Jerry Ryan, I could think of at least 3 ways I'd like to relate to her. Unfortunately, none of those were, you know, were appropriate for a 9 o'clock television show. So I thought about it and went back to Brannon and said, what if we turn the Kes relationship around, and the Doctor now decides that he is a more qualified person to teach 7 of 9 how to be human again than a real human would be. In other words, I'm the best person to mentor her in reclaiming her humanity. And I thought that was a funny idea, and that the way we could dramatize it was for me to have role-playing exercises with her, various situations where she would learn appropriate behavior through these social appropriateness role-playing exercises. And they took that idea and ran with it, and basically that whole arc went on for several seasons and culminated in Someone to Watch Over Me, where, which I call the My Fair Lady episode, where the teacher falls in love with his star pupil. So I had a great relationship, obviously, with Jerry, and a great relationship with Kate. We all, although I see the men more than the women in the show, we have all, you know, I am friendly with everybody and look forward to seeing everyone from the cast whenever the opportunity arises. And one of the nice things about doing these events is that I know that, for example, I'm going to see Tim Russ up here, or I do one with Ethan Phillips, I know I'm going to see him, or Garrett Wang, I said Garrett Wang, he'd kill me. Garrett Wang, Robert Duncan McNeil, wherever we go, we know we're going to have a mini reunion at the event itself. So that really is, it makes these events something to look forward to even more. So I think we had a great cast, you know, I certainly miss them. But after 7 years, we've told a lot of stories. So people say, "Are you sorry the show was canceled?" I mean, I'm sorry. I miss the people, and obviously you miss having a steady job. But I think that it would have been. It's good to end a show when you're still telling good stories rather than have it go on a little too long, I think. Did you have a question over here, or were you just waving to me? Yes, sir. Oh, did I call on 2 people at once? This gentleman here, and then I'll...
On Star Trek First Contact, when you were there, were you on set for a long time? What was that like?
Star Trek First Contact, I was on set for literally less than half a day. The weirdest thing about it was that it was shot on our soundstage, on Voyager's soundstage, on the Voyager sickbay set that had been redressed. new carpet. They took the doctor's office out, they moved some of the panels, they added different bio beds. But nonetheless, it was weird to walk through the door, the stage door I always walk through, and walk through the other sets and then suddenly be in a sick bay on another ship with another cast. It was odd. I worked very briefly. I thought it was a cute cameo. May I tell you the story of how I happened to be in the movie? Because this is kind of cute. When I knew they were writing the new script for the next Star Trek feature, I don't even think it had been titled First Contact yet. I just knew that they were preparing the script and that it was being written by Brannon Braga, who was one of our executive producers on Voyager, and Ronald Moore, who was one of the executive producers on Deep Space Nine. So I was in Rick Berman's office to talk about really my future as a director on Voyager, because I was in this sort of informal directing program where you went to editing and you studied the show for about a year, and then he gave you an opportunity to direct. So on my way out of his office, I kind of scratched my neck and turned around and said, a little like Columbo, I said, you're writing the new Star Trek feature, right, for the Next Gen cast? He said, yes. I said, I don't understand something. Why does Voyager have more advanced technology than the Enterprise? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, how come we have this emergency medical hologram program and they don't have one? I said, I'm not trying to pad my part. I'm just looking out for your logic here. And he smiled and he said, well, why would they all look alike? I said, it's a first-generation computer program. Why wouldn't they look alike, right? I said, it's like a popular screensaver. Everybody's got the same one, right? So he laughed and said, that's a very interesting idea. About a week later, I'm having dinner with Ron Moore at his house and his then wife. We had become friends. We met at a party, and even though he was producing the other show, my wife and I got invited to dinner. We're talking to him, and after dinner, I said, you and Brannon are writing the new movie script for the Next Gen movie. He said, yes. I said, I don't understand something. And I went through the whole thing again. At the end of which he said, that's a very interesting idea. About a couple days later, I'm in talking to Brannon Braga about something, and I say, you and Ron are writing the new... He goes, yeah. I said, I don't understand something. Whole thing again. And he says, that's a very interesting idea. 2 weeks after that, Jonathan Frakes calls me in my trailer and says, I have to thank you. I said, what for? He said, for helping me get the movie to direct. What do you mean? Well, they showed the episode, the first Voyager episode that Jonathan had directed that featured the Doctor, called Projections, which was entirely my character. He said they showed that episode to the studio and they approved me to direct the feature. And I said, well, that's very generous of you to credit me, but I'm sure it has nothing to do with me. Congratulations. I said, but, I don't understand something. I told him the whole story. And he said, that's a very interesting idea. 3 weeks later, Rick Berman calls me up and says, we've decided to put the Doctor in the movie. And I said, that's a very interesting idea. So you can plant the seeds, ladies and gentlemen, plant the seeds and then harvest sometimes. The important thing about Star Trek was it was always their idea. You always had to make it seem like the producers had the great idea. And it was never mentioned. I never said anything like, oh, you decided to do what I suggested? I said, no, that's great. What a really cool idea. You guys are really thinking. Do you have yes, you have a question right there.
Did you have any trepidation about getting involved with Star Trek and the lifelong relationship that can be for an actor? The question was, did I have any trepidation getting involved in a show like Star Trek, which changes your life so much as an actor? No, not really. Let's face it, I had been a professional actor at the time I was cast in Voyager for 17 years, and I had played a variety of roles. I had already been on a very acclaimed drama series, China Beach. I had played a recurring character on the most popular television comedy of its day, The Wonder Years. I had been on Broadway a couple of times in leading roles. I had a certain body of work as an actor. I think that Star Trek is much tougher if it's your first credit. Now, needless to say, I am much more associated with the Doctor than any other role I have played or will play as an actor. But because I had a body of work, I think that it was a little easier for me, once the show ended, to start being cast again in other roles. I think when Star Trek is really the only credit that the entertainment community knows you from, then it's a little harder to establish yourself apart from it. Does that make sense? But the upside to it is that, you know, I have this dedicated group of people, like you, who are interested in what I do. Even though Star Trek ended 10 years ago, you guys will still come out in the cold and the snow and sit and listen to me just because, primarily because I was on Star Trek, although we might have just one or two of you that are die-hard Stargate fans. But there's one right there. Quick! Jump on him! No. But this relationship that we have, the group of people that like you in a certain science fiction role, and then they follow your career through in and out of the genre, in and out of, you know, whether I'm on science fiction or whether I'm on in a children's movie. They still are interested in you because they liked you on Star Trek. So that is that kind of aspect of science fiction fans is very appealing to me, and it offers me the opportunity to travel and often to go to Europe and meet you know, fans over in Germany or England or France or Italy. And that is nothing to sneer at. That's something I'm proud of. And if I were given the opportunity to not have, you know, to have been a successful actor and made a good living outside of science fiction and not have this kind of opportunity, I would not change anything that's happened. I'm happy right where I am, freezing my ass off in Winnipeg. Yes, was there another question? Yes.
How did you decide to incorporate singing into your character?
Very good question. How did they decide who? Yet another one of my, oh boy, what a big mouth that guy has suggestions. I went up to Jerry Taylor, one of the three creators of Voyager, and I said, I think it would be interesting if the Doctor were an opera fan, because I find it funny that a character with, at that time, a very limited emotional repertoire would pick the most emotional form of human art, which I think opera arguably is, to be a fan of it. The idea of this passionate aria playing in sickbay and him just sitting there kind of stone-faced, listening with the slightest flicker of expression on his face, I thought was interesting comic fodder. Well, Jerry Taylor said, you know, we're doing a lot of Klingon opera stuff on Deep Space Nine, so it's not a good time to do it. But she must have remembered, because about a year later, I get a script and I open it up and the Doctor is singing opera in the first scene. And I said, no. I said listening to opera. But they were like, what? Well, if you can't sing it, we'll get someone else's voice. So that's how I came to sing on the show the first time. And about 80% of the singing on the show, when I sang O Suave Fanciulla in the first episode, when I sang La Donna Mobile, that was all me singing. So it was only the episode Virtuoso, where the Doctor becomes a singing sensation on another planet. About halfway through the show, my voice changes into a real opera singer, because it was just too high and too hard for a guy who's not only not a trained singer, but I'm also a baritone and not a tenor. So I did do most of my own singing, and I was heartbroken when I wasn't good enough to do all of my own singing, but believe me, amateur opera singing is not easy. It's not an easy field, you know what I mean? It's like amateur heart surgery.
Tuvok, I understand you are a Vulcan man. You have just gone without for 7 years about. Thank you. Great time for another plug. I only have 2 left. My CDs making fun of all of Star Trek parodies. They make fun of me, first and foremost, the show, the marketing, every aspect of Star Trek. Again, $4 from each one goes to a good charity. So, that's it for shameless plugs. Anyone else have another question? Yes, you, sir, who look like you're dressed as a knight. Are you dressed as a knight?
I have one of the most profound questions of the universe.
Okay.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Well, I know that in Star Trek we didn't get a nice codpiece like you have. So I can think of it one reason why Star Wars perhaps has an advantage. But I don't want to get into a fight here, and having been on Stargate and Star Trek, I'd love to be on Star Wars, so I will have made the trifecta. But I am, forgive me, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. I saw the first 3 movies, which turned out to be movies 4, 5, and 6, but who knew back then? I saw those. The Empire Strikes Back is still my favorite Star Wars movie. I think that as they went on, they tended to get, what's the word, a little more wooden to me. And I think that, you know, it's just, but I know a lot of people love them, and I admire the billions of dollars they've made. And George Lucas, God bless him, is now re-releasing them all in 3D because apparently he hasn't made enough money. So, anyway, it's I know a lot of very bright, interesting, intelligent, wonderful people who love Star Wars and think it's the greatest movie ever made, the first one, and I respect them and only make fun of them behind their backs. Okay, well that's good. That says something. Although he doesn't want to see his codpiece in 3D. That's why he's standing behind someone right now. I also like. I mean, Star Trek. I must couch what I've just said with the fact that I was not a Star Trek fan when I was cast on Star Trek. I didn't know anything about Star Trek. I'd seen maybe 2 episodes of the original series, and I thought, why are they all in ski pajamas? In fact, when I graduated from Yale, 2 of my friends from Yale, who I roomed with the following year in New York, they were both philosophy majors, very, very bright guys. And every afternoon they would sit down and watch a rerun of the original series, and I would walk through the living room and make shameless fun of them. Well, I bet those 2 guys are laughing at me now. It wasn't until, I mean, I've confessed this before to Star Trek fans, that I was not a fan when I was cast, but I have since, I've seen the light, I have joined the faithful, I've repented of my ways, I've joined the faithful. Thank you, Gene. I have been welcomed into the fold, because when I watched the Next Generation episodes that the producers gave me once they hired me, they gave me 10 great episodes, many of them in the medical arena, so that I would learn the Star Trek medical jargon, etc. I went and watched these shows with my wife and said, this is great. The storytelling, you know, they showed me, you know, Darmak, and in whatever the language show, which was brilliant, and I don't even remember, because now I've seen so many other Next Generation episodes since then, I don't remember all the ones they showed me. The one where Patrick Stewart sees himself as a younger man, the road not taken one. And the writing was great, and the acting was great. And I started to get really excited about our new venture, about being on Voyager. And the reason I found all of those, because they just seemed like they had a better sense of place, and of course much higher production values than the original series. And
I think it's simply that I just don't have the imagination that you guys have to watch the original series and get past some of the sort of tacky props and set pieces and really get to the story the way you have. I should, after all these, I should sit down and watch the 5 best original series episodes. That's what I should do. So maybe I will do that. Just give them to me. No. Give me your suggestions for the 5. I know A City on the Edge of Forever I know is great, right? What are the other, give me 2 others that are your favorites.
Trouble with Tribbles.
Trouble with, all right. I've seen that. I've seen the Trouble with Tribbles. Yeah, but a Tribble, after all, what is a Tribble anyway? A Tribble is like a, what? Kind of a furry dress shield? It's a little gremlin. It's a non-animate gremlin that just wiggles. It's the cheapest kind of gremlin. It's a low-budget gremlin. All right, one more. And name another. No, I'm sorry. Name another original series episode. Shore Leave. Okay. I heard Shore Leave is excellent. I should watch Shore Leave. It's about time. I should do my homework, guys. You're right. I'll get on it. Do we have? We still have time for more questions? Yes, in the front row.
What is your favorite thing about working on Stargate Atlantis?
We've moved to Stargate Atlantis. What was my favorite thing about it? Several things. First of all, the cast, from the moment I guest starred on SG-1, all of the Stargate actors, all of them, have been so welcoming and so nice to me, starting with Michael Shanks, Chris Judge, and Amanda in particular, and the late, wonderful Don Davis. They just were all so kind to me when I guest starred, and always happy to see me return. Same thing when they spun me over to Atlantis. Across the board, cast was great to me. So the actors, the fact that instead of looking at me as some guy who used to be on another science fiction series that the producers were just bringing in to stun cast to try to get a few, they looked at me as an individual, as an actor that they liked, and were very kind to me. See what I mean? Rather than looking at like, oh, he's trying to boost our ratings or whatever. They were all across the board wonderful. Producers, all great to me, especially Joe Malazzi, who I became quite good friends with, and he also has taken me out to dinner more than any other person on the planet. Joe Malazzi is the most generous guy, takes me out to these wonderful dinners while I'm up there, sometimes with my wife and his wife together, sometimes just the 2 of us if it's a work night. So really generous, kind producers. But the thing that made it the most fun is that it was a different experience than Star Trek. As much as I enjoyed working on Voyager, Stargate was much more sort of loosey-goosey. You know, that we were not allowed to ad-lib on Star Trek. If I had a spontaneous idea on Star Trek, that was fine, as long as I had my spontaneous